Webster has described the seven deadly sins as the sins that lead to the death of the soul. Or as some have said, he's coming back for me.
Keep speaking.
Keep speaking, he said.
Just leave it right there. Keep
Just
speaking.
leave it right there and keep speaking. No. All right, I am speaking.
It's recording, so
Okay,
just keep going.
okay, all right, it's recording. I'm going. So yeah, the sins that lead to the death of the soul or the death of the life of God within a person. They have also been referred to as capital sins. The sins that are the head or the source of all other sins. The sin out of which other sins flow. The Latin word caput for head is where that comes from. For our study, we are considering 7 of them. We heard last week that that list of deadly sins has grown. It has shrunken. It's been distilled, and we've kind of narrowed it down to 7, and they're holding pretty solid for right now, but next week they may change. We all have different techniques that we use to learn or memorize things. The one technique that I employed in high school to help me learn was an acrostic. If I had a list to remember, I took the first letter of it and tried to figure out how I can make a word or a sentence, something that I could help me remember. So with this one, we're going with pew slag. All right? It's not original with me. I got it from someone else. Pride, envy, wrath, and if you're listening, I guess maybe to the Brits or the Catholics, it's sloth and not sloth. Lust, and then for greed, many people call it avarice, so that's where the A comes from, and then G for gluttony. And if you looked at the flyer that is out, you'll notice that the list is different, but if you change a couple words, you can come up with pale gas. So whatever helps you learn the best is fine with me. The first in our list is pride, and I've been chosen to speak on it. Let me just say, this is the first time I've had the opportunity to teach with Francis Asbury Society. And when I'm finished, it may be the last. I don't know. But that's okay. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 says there's a time for everything. And the one line that Solomon left out of that was, there's a time to be invited and there's a time to be uninvited. But that may actually be in verse 7 where there's time to speak and time to be quiet. But being that the subject for this session is pride, and knowing that this is the first time I've taught here, and working out of the assumption that they usually ask people to speak out of their area of expertise, I'm wondering what sort of reputation I have with these fine folk here. My boss gets to speak on humility next week, so go figure there. But as a pastor, let me say, I'm sure glad the topic wasn't lust. I don't want to be that poor chap. Of course, now I sound like the Pharisee in that parable praying in the temple. I'm glad I'm not like that fella. I'm better than him. But then again, I guess that's pride. So maybe this is my area of expertise. When we're asked to do something like this, usually 2 thoughts go through our heads, maybe 3. The first thought being, did you call the right number to ask me to do this? The next thought is, oh yes. And then the third thought is, no. Did you ever face that conundrum? When someone or a group asks you to do something of this magnitude, or maybe greater, or even less, and you can't believe you have the opportunity to do it, what happens? Wow! I can't believe it. This is awesome. This is my time to shine. Yes. You been there? And then right after you hang up the phone, self-doubt comes, right? What if I blow it? What if I can't carry the water? I'll embarrass them. I'll embarrass myself. In some settings, I'll embarrass the family name, the family reputation. No, I better not do that. Is one of those pride? Just one of them? Or are both of them set in pride? That's the conundrum. Self-exaltation or self-preservation? I'm caught. I can't win. Either way is potentially a slide into what I would call a wormhole of pride that will transport me to the place where I am at the center of my universe. Everything revolves around me. Somewhere in there is the sweet spot of I'll do my best and let God do the rest. I'll do everything I can, then He either has to clean up the details or help me handle the praise. C.S. Lewis wrote in reference to either being a totalitarian or an individualist. He wrote this here, but I think it applies to what we're dealing with. He wrote, I feel a strong desire to tell you, and I expect you feel a strong desire to tell me, which of these two errors is worse. And he's talking about totalitarian versus individualism. But the devil is getting at us. That is the devil getting at us, wanting to tell each other which is better or worse. He always sends errors into the world in pairs of opposites. And he always encourages us to spend a lot of time thinking which is worse. You see why, of course. He relies on your extra dislike of the one error to draw you gradually into the opposite one. But do not be fooled. We have to keep our eyes on the goal and go straight through between both errors. We have no concern than that with either of them. So pride, of course, the end of that is humility, but the other end of humility somewhere, there is humility that gives birth to pride. And so we can't get our eyes too far on the self-promoting humility or too far on the pride. We have to go straight up the middle with humility. And Darrell will conquer that next week. My brother has frequently told me that pride is a horrible thing not to have any of. In many instances, it seems that that seems to be the case in our culture. Our culture seems to be bent on providing the least in substance and quality while expecting the most in compensation. And we could use a bit more pride in who we are and what we do, I would say. Take, for instance, the worker who sees an error in her work and thinks that subpar work is adequate for what she is getting paid. But wait, isn't that pride? It's just pride on the other end of the spectrum. Instead of pride in doing well, it's pride in who she is and what she thinks she's worth and what she's willing to contribute for what she thinks she's worth. The pride of perfection is on one end, the pride of doing a good job is in the center, and the pride of self-perceived worth is on the other end. And since she is jaded toward high expectations of others, she embraces the arrogance of her self-worth and never accomplishes what she's what she has been paid to do. However, the perfectionist never gets it done. And neither does the slacker. The one never quits, and the other one never finishes. For just a few minutes, let's consider how we use pride in our everyday language, in the English language. Do you use pride in your normal, what do they call, parlance of the day? How do you use the word pride? How do I use the word pride? It's not a rhetorical question. Yeah.
With our children.
With our children? And how would you use the word pride in that context?
They both have been successful. They both married well.
I'm proud of them. Okay, all right. Others? Mm-hmm. I'm proud of what I accomplished. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Like with an athletic team, the coach says, "Why don't you guys get out there and show some pride?"
Get out there and show some pride. Take ownership for what you're doing. Put some oomph in the game. Yeah. People came to see a performance, give them one. Yeah, you got it inside of you. Yeah. Others?
Somebody might not want to take a handout or a sense of that because they have a lot of pride.
Pride, yeah. The word pride in our English language kind of flows back and forth, and we're left to think, well, is that a sin? To be proud of my children? They're doing well? Is it pride? Is it a sin that is keeping me from taking a handout because I'm too proud to do that? I think the English language leaves a little bit to struggle with to try to understand exactly what pride is as we're thinking of in a deadly sin, because we say, he's a proud man in a bad way. She takes pride in her work. She cares about her work. I'm so proud of you. I'm encouraging you. You're doing a great job. You did your parents proud. His face beamed with pride. So in our English language, pride can be a good thing or said as a good thing. Here are some definitions. If you're Noah Webster or work for Oxford, you could probably come up with one or more of these definitions. Too high an opinion of one's own ability or worth. A feeling of being better than others. Or a reasonable and justifiable sense of one's own worth. Self-respect. A sense of pleasure that comes from some act or possession. And a group of lions. To define this is one thing, but to find out how it plays out in our life is quite another thing. And we could probably spend some time sharing stories here in a little bit about that. But given these definitions, when was the last time you exercised pride? When was the last time you exercised pride? And if you don't mind sharing that, I'd love to hear a story. And this is the reason why. We gain understanding of ourselves and what is good and what is normal by hearing the stories of others. I remember when Kelly and I moved here to Wilmore, we were part of the Wilmore Free Methodist Church in the young married class, and we met in this room and sat around in circles. And as the class happened, we would share stories and interact with the scriptures and interact with each other. And we'd hear stories of what other couples were going through. And when we left, we'd be talking about, they're dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with. Maybe we're not weird. Maybe this is normal. So would you feel comfortable? Now this is being videotaped. And now everybody's like, hey, it's not like it's lust. It's just pride, okay? Which is interesting because theologians put pride here and lust way down here. It's one of the lowly sins, but we've kind of flipped them. This is where I struggle with pride. When I'm on task, which is rarely often, but when I'm on task and I have to get somewhere, if you're between me and that door and I'm going out, my focus is on the door. And if there's just a little bit of space between you and the table, I'm going through that space. That's where I'm headed. And because I've got to get there. And my pride needs to be pulled in check and say, yo, hold up. Don't run her over. You know, she's going to move here in a little bit. You will get there. But no, it's my task. I've got to get it accomplished. You're between me and where I'm headed. Double parked in the aisle in Walmart, right? 2 carts standing there talking. You can't get around. And they do that at church. Right in the middle aisle. They'll stand there and talk. It's like, we got 300 people to get out of here. What are you doing? So that's my issue. What's yours? Yes, sir.
So which one of those was a sinful version of pride? So like question, like the third one, for example, what's the difference between the biblical principle of delighting? Like, can we delight in God's word? And that would be taking pleasure in God's word. That wouldn't be sinful.
No, these are just the general ones out of the dictionary. These here right yet.
So how would you define the sinful version of pride?
We're going to get to that.
Yes. Okay.
Good question. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thanks for thinking ahead. Appreciate that. Yeah. Anybody care to share? They're like, no, just move on. Just go. Yeah.
So this actually happened to me today. I run a business where I help people all day long, and I've had to do a lot of it on my own because the gal that does it with me hasn't been involved because she has a lot of things going on. But when she's back and she wants to help, she is in every piece of everything that I'm doing it her way and not my way. No, and not even my way, not the company's way. Really, not the company's way. So today, I have been working with this gal for 4 months, and she's like, hey, put me in the group chat, I'm gonna do it all for you. And I should have been like, oh, cool, I don't have to deal with that anymore. But instead, I was like, I've been doing this for 4 months, and now you're gonna come in and you're gonna do something different than what? And it even happened again on the way here in the truck before we got out of the car. Same gal, same thing. Someone asked a question, I gave the response. She gave her response, which wasn't the company response. So I backed off, and then she had to screenshot where she found her response to prove that she was correct. My response was also 3 above it in the same folder, but I let it go. But
Can I request prayers?
But it has been on my mind a lot, especially because we were coming to this tonight. I was like, wow, like I really need to hear this. Like, why? Why is it so hard for me? Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. Yeah. The devil knows our weakness. Yeah. Anyone else want to share where you struggle with pride? It could be, or you've celebrated in pride. It's a good version of pride or whatever. Yeah.
I think the Bible, the Scripture says, "Do all to the glory of God." And so whatever I'm doing, I try to do my very best. And it's probably because I want to serve the Lord mainly. And I think that's a good type of pride.
Right.
I try to practice that with myself.
The fine balance between pride and dignity. How does that come in? Somebody said the dignity of effort. You know, some would say, well, that's being prideful. No, it's caring enough to put effort into it. Well, for the sake of our discussion tonight, we'll kind of go with that first one that was up there. Too high an opinion of one's own ability or worth, a feeling of being better than others. And can I interject in there, even God? Being better even than God. The quality of having an excessively high opinion of oneself or one's importance superseding that of God. What we're going to go through now are some distilled statements from Thomas Aquinas, from some writings of his, the Summa Theologica. His first statement about pride is the habit of making more of ourselves than we really are. The story of a celebrity on a plane that was on the tarmac and had to go back and disembark. They had to be scheduled for another flight, and they're standing there in front of the counter, a long line. He's way in the back. He's getting antsy. He's tired of waiting. He runs up to the desk, slams down. He says, "Listen, I've got to be on this flight, and I want in first class." And they said, "Sir, we'll get to you as soon as we can." He said, "You don't understand. I'm on this flight, first class now." "Sir, we'll get to you as soon as you can." He said, "Do you know who I am?" She said, "No, sir, but just a minute." She picked up the intercom and said, "Excuse me, please. May I have your attention? We have a gentleman at gate 14 in a blue suit and a red tie who does not know who he is. If he is missing from your party, please come to gate 14. Something like that happened here in Wilmore with a noted person in a religious institution, and I'm not telling tales because it happened in public, where being at an event, the line wasn't moving. Wanting to get through the line, went to the front and said, "I need to get through." And they said, "We're doing this as fast as we can. We've had some challenges and complications, but you don't understand. We'll get to you. I am so-and-so, and this is what I do." Great. If you'll please take your spot at the end of the line where you were, we will get you through as possible. That's not a tale. That's recorded in the 15th book of the Chronicles of Religious People in Wilmore. You can look it up. Number 2, pride is an inordinate esteem for one's own excellence. Or as my brother would often remind me when he would say, "Remember, I am not conceited. Conceit is a fault, and I don't have any faults." Number 3, pride aspires. It drives our appetite to be more than we actually are, whether in reality or in how we present ourselves. This would indicate that pride is part of the will. It's that part of us that makes us want to succeed, makes us want to be right, makes us want to win, be number one, no matter the cost. We've got to make it. We don't care who is collateral damage. We won't accept anything less. Pride is rooted in a self-sufficiency which omits or discounts God in considering who and what we are. Good old self-reliance. That's the American way. You heard about the guy who bought a piece of land and cultivated it into a beautiful garden. His friend came by to see it. He was just absolutely amazed at the lush vegetation that was there, all the vegetables that were growing. As he walked around, saw the different flowers that were growing too, he just kept oohing and awing, and he looked at his friend. He said, "Man, you and God have a great garden here." He said, "God, nothing. You should have seen it when he had it to himself." Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Leaving God out. It's just me and I've got it done. Number 5, pride is a direct turning away from God and is an act of contempt for God because it is an unwillingness to be subject to Him. It ranks with actual hatred for God. We used to have this statement, talk to the hand because the face don't understand. And that's pretty much what this is saying here. It's a contempt for God, an unwillingness to be subject to Him. The very number 6 says the very essence of pride is an aversion from God. Other sins may involve this aversion by their nature as sins, but pride is this aversion. Hence, the first and worst of all sins, Thomas writes, is the sin of pride. Pride is the dislike and disinclination toward God. Maybe it's kind of like just step aside, God. I've got this. Let me go. Or we say, yeah, whatever. You know, how the kids signal the W and E, whatever. So they continued on whatever, major loser. But that's kind of what it's saying to God. Yeah, whatever. The seventh thing that Aquinas writes is pride is the source. Pride as a special sin is the source of many sins. Pride as a general sin is not merely the source of other sins, it is actually in them. So what you're seeing here is a little bit of debate going on back and forth about the role of pride in sinfulness. Saint Gregory calls pride the queen of vices, which conquers the heart of man and then delivers that heart to the capital sins. St. Gregory doesn't mention pride as one of the capital sins. He sees them the mother of all other sins. And so he sees it, as he says, the queen of vices that attacks the heart, grabs the heart, and then hands it over to the other sins. Based on the writings of St. Gregory, Thomas Aquinas came up with these 4 types of pride as well. Claiming excellence that's not possessed, or just saying, I'm the best. That's my sort of pride. I am the best. Or 2, thinking of one's good is from oneself. I am good, but I did it. I deserve it. Or 3, thinking that one's good is from God, but is owing it to one's own deserts. Or another way of saying it is, I'm good, but God gave it to me because I deserve it. I can make these handouts available to you if this is stressing you, so that'd be fine. Okay. My apologies. Let's look at a couple of biblical concepts of pride. In Isaiah 14, 13 and 14, we see the desire to be God. This is the story in Isaiah where he writes, he says, Israel, one day you will taunt Babylon, your former captives, with this saying. And as you read down through that text, it says, how you have fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world, for you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High God. We often attribute that sin to who? Satan. Boy, doesn't he get the short end of that stick. Yeah, because too many times we're right there with him. Yeah. A desire to be God. The second one is a moral self-righteousness. Kind of like the parable of the Pharisee in the temple. Lord, I'm here praying to you, and I'm glad I'm not like that other guy. I'm glad I'm not the poor chap that has to talk on lust. I've got it better than him. Or maybe confidence in one's own accomplishments. In the book of Daniel, chapter 4, the story of Nebuchadnezzar went up in his castle, his palace, threw open the windows, looked out, said, "Wow, look at what I have created. I am the name and likeness of awesome. That is me." And you know what God said? Yep, you're going to pay for that one. From now on, you're going to be outstanding in your field. You'll be a wild man. You'll be living with the beast. You'll be eating grass like cows. Confidence in one's own accomplishments. Number 4, ambition for prominence. Mark chapter 10, verse 34 through 35. James, John, and Jesus having a conversation. Actually, Jesus probably listened a little bit more than he talking, as he usually did. That, hey, when you get to heaven, can we be your best buds? I'll sit on the left hand, he'll sit on the right. What do we got to do? Slide you a little extra down here? He's like, come on, put us in. Nope, sorry, can't do it. Ambition for prominence. And 5, lack of teachability, which we see in Hebrews when it encourages us to obey our leaders and to submit to them. Learn from those over you. Don't be hard-necked or stiff-necked obstinates. There's 6 different types of pride that are highlighted in Scripture either. Yes? Yes?
Previous picture again.
I'm sorry?
That third one, confidence in one's accomplishments.
Yes, sir.
When you need a certain amount of confidence to complete a difficult task.
Yes, sir.
Without showing a lot of pride as a result.
Yes, sir. And therein lies the challenge of the English language, to try to narrow in specificity what we're talking about in a vernacular language that we understand. But you are precisely right.
What you're saying too is, I see a fine line between confidence and being too prideful.
And arrogance, maybe.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. And so maybe we could tack onto that confidence in one's own accomplishments without proper acknowledgement of God's involvement. Yeah.
Maybe singular confidence.
I'm sorry?
Maybe one's singular confidence in one's accomplishment.
Yes. Yeah. Good thought. Thanks, Bill. Others? 6 types of pride highlighted in Scriptures, and you would find these in either a negative form or a positive form, not necessarily a way of saying, here's an example of this particular one. Self-exaltation gives pride gives credit to himself or to oneself. How many times are you in conversation when someone is telling about something that happens? And they say, when that happened, that made me so mad, and I told him. And then they go on to tell, and I'm thinking, so you told him. Good. But we think there's some credit in who we are, in our ability to say something to someone else, as if that brings credence to the table. Self-exaltation. Self-promotion. Pride welcomes credit from others. This seems easier to handle in some fields, some areas than others. If you tell a football player, you did a great job when you made that tackle. It's like, yeah, coach, I was in there doing the best I can, did what you... When you tell a pastor, hey, you did a good job on a sermon, you knocked it out of the park, that is totally different. And maybe you wouldn't know that because you're not a pastor, but you're left with like, what do I do with this football? How do I handle this? Do I say, yeah, thank you? But then again, if you don't say it, then the other end of that is, well, nobody really appreciated it. Pride gets you either way. You can't win. Self-justification. Pride expects credit from God himself. In some ways that may play out as, well, maybe God will let me slide on this one. He won't hold me accountable. Yes, sir.
Would the difference between like pride welcoming criticism from others versus the sinful versus the righteous is when it's me look at myself, whereas someone else is recognizing what God has done, and therefore it's self-promotion would be that it points the finger at myself rather than receiving what is being given.
Right. Yeah. It's all in what you do with it, really. It's the attitude, intent of the heart. Self-justification is the third one. Pride expects credit from God himself. We just covered that. Fourth, self-degradation. Pride tears oneself down. I've never been good at that. I'll always be horrible. Yeah. It's hard to see that as pride, but it is. It really is. Self-demotion. Pride compares oneself to others. Everybody's better than me. Yeah. And that's where I'm comfortable, and that's where my worth is. It sounds sick, but it's a form of pride. Self-condemnation. Pride judges himself. Why can't I do anything right? I ought to be able to do this. Why can't I do it right? To jump back to number 7 that we talked about from Aquinas a little bit ago, he says pride is a special sin, is the source of many other sins. Pride is a general sin, is not merely the source of other sins, it's actually in them. And St. Gregory says it is the mother of all of them. This is trying to grasp with what pride is exactly and how it impacts us exactly and precisely. Is it at the beginning of all sins? Is it part of all sins? Is it the part that delivers the heart, as it said, to the rest of the sins? Well, some have described pride as, I guess you could say, the marijuana of sins. It's the gateway sin which opens up the door for all other sins to come in. Father David McConey, a Jesuit priest, said he believes it is the fountain of sin, pride is the fountain of sin from which all other sins flow. The Book of Wisdom of Sirach states that pride is the beginning of sin, which sounds a lot like James, doesn't it? But James says something else is the beginning of sin, doesn't it? The love of money is the root of all evil. Theologians, scriptures, and ancient wisdom literature unanimously agree pride is a serious sin, and from it all other sins seem to derive their source of life or death, as the case may be. In discussing these 7 deadly sins with several different scholars, Father David McConey said that he raises the possibility that if the fountain of sin is pride, then maybe the sub-fountain of sin is that which gives way to the sub-fountain of sin that gives way to pride is fear. Maybe the sub-fountain that makes pride happen is fear. Maybe our propensity toward pride is birthed out of one of the many variants of fear. Have you ever considered that? I hadn't considered it until I heard him say that. And the more that I think about it, the times that I have acted in a prideful way, as I evaluate those, it seems to me that I have been fearful in those situations. I'm fearful that I'm going to be one-upped. I'm fearful that I'm going to be shamed in some sort. I'm fearful that I'm not really as good as I pretend to be and others are going to find out. I fear that God is holding back on me and He really doesn't have my best in mind. I can't trust Him. God's holding out on me. He's going to shame me by keeping me from doing really fun, cool, self-fulfilling stuff. Fear that makes me fight for myself. Maybe, just maybe, Our struggle with fear is where it begins. Have you considered how many scriptures talk about fear or fear not? When you say fear not, what do you think of? What scripture verses you think of? Perfect love cast out fear. Fear not, for I am with thee. Isaiah, yep. Angel to Hagar, fear not, God has seen you. Angel to Joshua, be strong and courageous, do not be frightened. Luke 1 to Zechariah, don't be afraid, your wife's going to have a baby. To Mary, don't be afraid, you're going to have a baby. To the shepherds, don't be afraid, there's a baby. And then to Jesus, or to the disciples, Jesus walking on the waters, what's he say? Hey, don't be afraid, it's me. To the crowd, don't be afraid, you're worth more than sparrows. And then as you said, Isaiah, fear not, for I am with you. So I wonder if fear just may be part of the root to our pride problem. Verse 11 in Isaiah 41 there really launches into a message of hope for not having fear. He says, all who rage against you will surely be ashamed and disgraced. Those who oppose you will be as nothing and perish. Though you search for your enemies, you will not find them. Those who wage war against you will be as nothing at all. For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. Do not be afraid, you worm Jacob, little Israel. Do not fear, for I myself will help you, declares the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. See, I will make you into a threshing sledge, new and sharp, with many teeth. You will thresh the mountains and crush them and reduce the hills to chaff. You don't need to take up your own cause. You don't need to act in a prideful way. I've got you covered. I'm here. And as you said, 2 Timothy says, fear not. God, well, you didn't say it, but it's close to it. God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love. Perfect love casts out all fear is what you had said. Fear not, they say, is in the Bible 365 times. I don't know that that is accurate. That's what's been said. I haven't counted and verified it, so I don't want to stand here on that premise. But they say it's in there 365 times. The topic of fear is mentioned over 500 times in the Bible. And you're starting to think, I thought this was a study on pride, not on fear. I was afraid you would say that. So, let's talk about some Bible stories that showcase pride. If you had to pick a Bible story about pride, what would be that Bible story? Goliath. All right, David and Goliath, yeah. What am I, a dog? Yeah, good. Someone else? Saul. And which part of the Saul story?
After he decided
He was going to do this? Yep. You know why he did that? Fear. Yeah. Fear. Fear that wasn't going to get to battle in time. They were going to wipe him out before Samuel got there. Yeah. Someone else? I'm sorry? Pharaoh. Yeah. Yeah. God hardened his heart. Yeah. Babel. The Tower of Babel. Yes. Yeah. Others? King Herod. Yep. About Cain and Abel. Jonah. Jonah's an interesting one. He didn't want to go. His pride was that one where I've got it good and I may not deserve it, but I don't want anybody else to have it either. I've got it, I don't deserve it, but I don't want anyone else to get it. That was his sin of pride towards the Ninevites. He's like, God, I'm not going there because I know what you'll do. You'll give them the same thing you've given to me, and I don't want them to have it. Yeah. Oh, don't flatter me, man. Yeah. Let's talk about some consequences of pride that we find in the Bible. You have to think of a scripture verse that talks about pride. What's the first one that comes to your mind? You probably see it up there. Yeah. Pride goes before destruction, haughty look before a fall. Yes, yep. Isaiah 2:11 there. Pride of men shall be humbled. The haughty says, the haughty looks of a man shall be brought low, and the lofty pride of men shall be humbled, and the Lord will be exalted. Daniel 4:30, a voice fell from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar said, is not this great Babylon which I have built by my mighty power a royal residence for the glory of my majesty? And while the words were still in his mouth, a voice fell from heaven. So pride goes before a fall, as we said. Pride men, or the lofty pride of men shall be humbled and brought low. A voice fell from heaven. Daniel 5:20, what's it say? When his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from the kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. Obadiah 3:4, writing to the Edomites, saying, yeah, you're up there on the cliffs of Petra. Don't worry, big boys. I've seen how proud you are. You're coming down. So the common theme here is, if God doesn't like it, He doesn't put up with it, and something or someone is going to take a fall. Hashtag God doesn't like it. Hashtag something's going to fall. Someone's coming down. His voice is coming down, and then the pride's coming down. So, $50 million question. How do you tell when you've got pride? C.S. Lewis says, to find out how much pride you have, ask yourself, how much do I dislike it when others snub me or refuse to take notice of me or shove their oar in? You know what that means? Shove their oar in. When someone shoves their oar in, it's when they interrupt. They stick their nose in your business. They get in it with you. Yeah. So where they shove their oar in, patronize me, or show off. The point is that each person's pride is in competition with everyone else's pride. It is because I wanted to be the big noise at the party. It is because I wanted to be the big noise at the party that I am so annoyed at someone else being that big noise. Pride is essentially competitive by nature, while other vices are competitive only by accident. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person. So, how do you like it when others snub you, or refuse to take notice of you, or butt into your business, or patronize you, or show off in front of you and show you up to be less? Pride is a competition with everyone else. Question is, do we join into that competition with them? Do we join in competition with God? I revert to C.S. Lewis again. He says, pride has been the chief cause of misery in every nation and every family since the world began. Other vices may sometimes bring people together. You may find good fellowship and jokes and friendship among drunken people and unchaste people, but pride always means enmity. It is enmity. It's always a fighting amongst each other. So, how do you get rid of pride? That's Daryl's problem. As I thought about pride, and I'm no expert in all the ins and outs of it, but I'm wondering if pride is kind of like darkness and silence and evil. It's not that it is something, it's the absence of something. Darkness is the absence of light. Silence is the absence of noise. evil is the absence of good. Maybe pride is the absence of humility. I don't know. So how do you recognize it more fully in your life? Go back to C.S. Lewis. Hope you're not tired of him yet. If you are, this is the last one. He said, in talking about God and theology, this is what he writes. I remember once when I had given a talk to the RAF, Royal Air Force. An old, hard-bitten officer got up and said, I have no use for all that stuff. But mind you, I'm a religious person. I'm a religious man too. I know there's a God. I've felt him. Out alone in the desert night. The tremendous mystery of that. And that's why I don't believe all your neat little dogmas and formulas about him. To anyone who's met the real thing, they all seem so petty, pedantic, and unreal. I offer that to you as just the possibility that we can talk about this and try to define it, but I'm afraid we won't really come to grips with what pride is until we see it in its heinousness in our lives. Until we have a personal, one-on-one interaction with it. And that's when it'll be fundamentally life-changing. When we see that we have trashed somebody by our pride, and we see how they feel. When we can come to grips with how we have stuffed our face in the hand of God and told him, we've got this. So I think that would be my encouragement as we go into this week, is not so much to relive what we've discussed, but maybe ask God to help us to experience what he will allow us to see and experience when it comes to pride, so that we can understand it more fully, and so that we can hate it just as he hates it. Thank you.